Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, listening to this podcast, that you're keeping well, you're in good health, and that the people around you are all good. Today's episode obviously is called The Best Success System. And I suppose this is a big topic, and I'm hoping to maybe provoke some thought here to maybe make you think a bit deeper, maybe look in a slightly different direction than normal. But in essence, everything that produces something has a system, right? So everything. And I suppose this morning, just before recording this podcast, I got a cup of coffee, local van, make nice coffee. There's one barista there. They've got their coffee machine, and they do nice business. That's a little system. And anybody who's an entrepreneur or, will know that the value very often is in creating a system. The ultimate system is one that you can just step out of and not be in all the time. Obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck, or CEOs get stuck actually in the machine, get stuck in the system. Different conversation, but everything that works has a system. The question is, how well is it working? So businesses are systems with people. Sports teams, they're all systems. There's players, they've got different roles on the pitch. There's also management, there's coaches, there's in a business context with sports, there's obviously all sorts of different roles behind the scenes. I like to think of Formula One as obviously very high performance elite sport. I was listening to a podcast there, interview with Toto Wolff, the principal of Mercedes, the best performing team for the last 7-8 years in Formula One. And he was talking about essentially, their business is essentially made up of processes and people. And those interactions create a system. But also there's a kind of a wider system in every context. There's a Formula One ecosystem that includes the fans. Even if I look at my Apple phone, or even when I'm recording this on a Apple MacBook, and there's all sorts of systems that allow me to record this podcast. Apple have an ecosystem, so the question is, do we think about the systems that we have, both as leaders in any context, whether it's parents, because your family is a system. There's an output, there's outcomes, your system of parenting. But obviously, because this is the inner edge, what I'm really interested in is the inner systems, because you can have great outer systems, but if the inner systems of anybody in the system, like a person, goes off, which will happen because that's business and life. Life is a full contact sport. So is business for sure. So everybody has their own success system, though. They've got areas where they do well, and maybe other areas where they'd like to do better, maybe not so well. But not often enough do people think about the inner system going on inside themselves or going inside the people around them. What's their system for handling adversity? What's their system for creating? And what I find fascinating is that most people are not really conscious of whatever inner approach or inner system they have. And if you're looking for an edge, that's the place to look, not just for yourself, but also, in my capacity is working with leaders and entrepreneurs, CEOs. My job is to kind of help them identify the inner systems that work and also the inner systems that don't, and perhaps then drop dependency on a lot of systems, which I'll explain hopefully in a few minutes. So the inner systems, right? Now, I'm thinking of a company in the US, and the name escapes me right now. I came across it a few months ago, but what I liked about their approach was that when things went wrong, which happens all the time, obviously in business, that's how you fail forward, essentially. They would focus on the system. They had this phrase, focus on the system, not on the people. So they would say, well, okay, whatever system we have is creating this result. We want a different result, a better result. Let's look at the system. Now, what I didn't see anywhere in reading about them was, do they look at the inner systems, as in the internal systems inside people, how they think, how they respond, how they react, how they create. And it's very clear now through research that people who are really good at creating success in any context have a certain type of inner system. And I'll go through a couple of examples of that now in the next few minutes. But just to kick it off, something that occurred to me this week, which has kind of prompted me talking about this podcast, which wasn't originally my intention, and this happens to me all the time. I've got a list of topics I'm going to talk about this over the next few weeks on the podcast, and then what happens is something else pops in and goes, actually, that's better. So I hope it is. So I was talking to a client during the week who was going through one of my processes called the clarity experiences, where I generally start new clients, and it's kind of a chance to step back and look at the reality of their life and their work and their business, and then also create a kind of an authentic, meaningful vision for what success would excite them. But that's also true to themselves, both in business and in life, which is unfortunately not that common. So anyway, as we're going through it, and we're kind of halfway through the process, which runs over about 4 weeks, he's given me an excuse as to why some of the homework wasn't done in between sessions. It was kind of like the whole, the dog ate my homework type of excuse. And he was talking about, instead of kind of getting stuck into some stuff that we agreed and talked about, how he built something in his back garden, which essentially was kind of an outdoor bar area that held his barbecue, and it sounded actually pretty cool. But he was talking about how he created that and the process, and what I was fascinated by, which I always am, is, what's going on here now inside him? What's his system for creating something like this? And this guy, very smart, very capable guy. It was very clear that he was, but got very much into building this tiki bar in the back garden. So there was an area of his back garden, and he said, okay, I'm going to completely gut it, and I'm going to put in this new tiki bar. I'll have a barbecue there, and I'll put in a bar and everything else. It'd be great. And he was telling me that his wife was slagging him off, because what he generally does with DIY projects when he gets really excited is he just kind of stands and stares, is the way he described it, stands and stares. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So when you're standing and staring, what are you doing? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, what are you imagining? Where are you looking at? I said, oh, well, I'm kind of playing around in my mind with what the end result's going to look like. And then I'm kind of looking at that in my head and figuring out, okay, well, how would I do that? And I have to do this and put in a beam or a joist or whatever else. And I'm kind of working it out backwards and forwards in my mind. I said, all right. And how does it feel when you're doing that? Do you feel stressed, or you feel pretty good? I said, no, I kind of feel kind of in the flow. It's kind of effortless. I'm just kind of playing around with stuff in my mind. All right. Okay. Yeah. And see, I said, were you happy with the result? He says, oh, no, really happy. We're delighted with it. And I was saying to him, well, do you apply that same sort of inner approach? Because that's a system of thinking, an inner system of thinking. Do you apply the same approach to the business? And without going into it in too much detail, it was obvious that he wasn't to that extent. In fact, when he went into the business, it was kind of generally causing more stress, and he certainly wasn't in that kind of a free flow, creative mode. Which I think for most people, when they're doing something that they enjoy or something, they're just not overthinking it. And they give themselves also a reason as to why that is. But essentially, a different type of inner system kicks in. Now, in my experience, I think that that's more natural almost, and it's very unconscious in people. They don't realize the value of it, or even what they're doing, or even the fact that they're using it in one area of their life and maybe not in another. And then I could go to the flip side, where I was also dealing with somebody during this week, ironically, who is very successful in business. I mean, this person has made a lot of money in the gazillions territory. And they have a very clear, it was obviously had a very clear success system, but an outer system in terms of their approach to business, extremely good. I mean, excellent. And then also an inner system in terms of their approach to business. But what was interesting was they have enough money now, so they've stepped out of the business world essentially, but the issue was that they're probably more lacking in purpose, was the way they phrased it. And from my point of view, what was very evident was that there just was a lack of aliveness, or va-va-voom. And I guess that's the same thing, for them. But as I was saying to that person, well, you're associating the activity of running your business perhaps with that sense of being in the flow, being in the zone. But what are you doing on the inner side mentally when you're in that zone? And the very short answer was, well, I'm just very focused on the activities at hand. I'm very focused on what I'm creating. I said, right, so why can't you use the same approach in your personal life? Which initially, when they were looking at me, didn't make any sense to them, but it obviously struck a chord because of the conversation that we then had. So, like, your thinking does determine a huge amount, but we don't necessarily always consciously catch the unconscious thinking that's going on at a deep level inside of us. But again, as you're probably figuring out with me, there's maybe different angles on things. So on one level, you may be aware that there's a huge amount of research over the last 30 years in an area called learned optimism. It also kicks in and affects performance psychology. And what they've shown very clearly in research is that people who are very optimistic have a mental habit of thinking a certain way. It's an inner system again. And a lot of it's to do with when something happens, whether it's good or bad, particularly say even bad events, how the person explains stuff to themselves. It's called explanatory style. How they explain stuff to themselves, which is essentially how they think about a situation, has a huge effect then on their perception, which affects their behavior, which affects their actions, which affects their results. So a key skill really, in any capacity if you're looking for more success, is to become much more aware, much more conscious of what you are thinking, but also to question the validity of that thinking. And if it doesn't serve you, to drop it. So learned optimism in particular, which was pioneered originally by Martin Seligman, has kind of spawned this whole other area around grit research and growth mindset and everything else, is very valid. But it also has a problem embedded in it, I believe, which is that even with very optimistic people, the danger is if you can't shut it off when it should be shut off. All right. So say, for example, could have somebody who's very motivated and achieving certain results, like a lot of high energy, high performance entrepreneurs or CEOs, or even high performance sports people, but they might have a very much clear optimistic thinking structure inside, but they could be coming from a very self-centered, egocentric point of view. So, and you could say that that's primarily maybe the old model. And I know I've spoken with many leaders over the last 10 years where I'm thinking of one person, even in a very large multinational, who were saying that they saw that one of the biggest problems that they had with a lot of their high performers was that they really fundamentally underneath it all, no matter what they said, were actually just thinking about themselves, not necessarily about the well-being of the people around them, or even the well-being of the organization, or indeed the well-being of the community of the world. And even at universities like MIT are now saying, well, we need to look at our business models, because they're recognizing that the inherent model from the industrial age was very much ego-centered, is what they're saying. And they're suggesting we need to transition across to what they're calling eco-centered, not necessarily the best just for the environment, but eco in terms of even humanity and the best thing for the world, which I particularly like. So, for example, I know a lot of entrepreneurs where aggression is their system. Okay, let's be aggressive to get stuff done, push, and that will get results. But it may not be the very best thing to get results. And certainly going forwards in today's world, where we've got 5 different types of generations, the newer generations don't respond to that. And talent will leave leaders that are highly aggressive. In a football context, I often think about now, Man United, or say, because I'm a fan, so don't hold that against me if you're Liverpool or whatever else. But Jose Mourinho, one of the top managers in the last 20 years in football around the world, he struggled recently over, the last 2 or 3 teams he's managed. And it seems to be more to do with the system that he's used doesn't seem to be fitting with the times, where the likes of Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp obviously have a different system, which essentially is an inner system, a value system around, okay, how do they actually look at people? How do they think about people? It's less command and control. It's much more collaborative, much more like a conductor. So I think the challenge for you, or if I'm talking to somebody privately, I'm saying, well, look, if the outcomes don't match up to your expectations for whatever reason, I think you need to look at the system. The outer system is very important, but I think the inner system inside you is also equally important, but also the inner system around people around you. And for me, the very best success system is one that is clarity-led. To use MIT's language, it's eco-centered as opposed to ego-centered. Now, a kind of a very simple analogy is, and this is where I'm going to maybe stretch perhaps your thinking on this, hopefully, is that your physical body is an incredible system. Your physical body, so it has all these organs inside, doing all this work, pumping blood, healing cells, regenerating, bringing in, it's just an amazing network of systems. The heart, the kidneys, the liver, the brain. Like it's endless, all the different endocrine systems, the nervous system. It's just incredible. But all of that's happening at an unconscious level. All of it. You don't have to tell it to do anything. So if I cut my hand, my body has a system and an intelligence built into it that will heal my hand. It's incredible. So is it that much of a stretch for me to suggest that maybe there's this deep intelligence built into our minds as well? Because that's what my experience is showing me, is that there's a deep intelligence, so that when your mind is in its natural state, which is calm, centered, clear, relaxed, it does seem to me that naturally something kicks in where you naturally start to think more optimistically. I'm somebody who was very much, I had a system at one point in my life where I was using depressive thinking without realizing it. When I realized it, then I trained myself to go into optimistic thinking, which definitely helped. But you know what? It took a lot of energy and work to manage it. And actually that was at times exhausting, and at times it actually kind of really damaged me as well. And actually in the last maybe 6-7 years, I've discovered that there's actually an easier way. There is a genuinely better way, which is more to do with cultivating your ability to be in the present, to be relaxed in a non-effortful, stressful way. Easy to say, not so easy to do, because it is very much an experiential feeling thing. But when you're in that space, your mind seems to have a deep intelligence, is my experience, that's when creativity kicks in. That's when the optimism naturally flows in with no effort. That's when I'm more inclined to be in free flow mode. And my experience now is that it's not something that we have to learn. It's more that we have to unlearn the other conditioning that we've picked up from society from the last, whatever, few hundred years, and picked up from people around us and the systems around us. You know, systems need to change with the times. So a lot of our organizations that talk about, is our business fit for purpose for the next 5 years? What do we need to make it fit for purpose? You have to change the system, change the processes, change the people, or get new people, shake things up. But what about you? Are you fit for purpose? You know, what about your own inner system? How are you assessing that? How are you going to upgrade it? Now, to me, what interferes with your natural, deep inner intelligence, that inner system, the natural one that's already there, what interferes with it is self-consciousness, and anything that creates tension. So tension is the enemy. The friend is the ability to be present in the moment. So overthinking, overanalysis, being overly self-conscious of even what you think about, what you want, and being self-motivated, or if your agenda is all about yourself, as in what's in it for me, that shuts down, seemingly, in my experience, the impact that your natural intelligence can kick in. And at the end of the day, you know, you'd have to recognize that nature is an incredible system. It's just beyond comprehension as to how smart nature is, life is. All you have to do is watch any of the David Attenborough documentaries to kind of see that truth. But again, all you've got to do is walk out your front door and just look at the bees buzzing around a plant or a flower and just recognize all the different interconnected systems. But you know what? As human beings, we're also part of that nature. We're also part of that intelligence. And that to me is a great opportunity, because I think this is where the opportunity is. So some food for thought for you is, where do you have, first of all, a proven success system? Like, what are you naturally seemingly good at? And maybe you could reflect, take out a pen and a bit of paper, and like the guy with the tiki bar, write down, what am I doing inside myself when things are going well? What am I saying to myself? How am I in terms of even my feeling, my state? And then can I apply that system to other areas, in particular, maybe your work? Or perhaps if everything's going well in work, maybe apply it to your life, your personal relationships. And then part B is, what about experimenting for the next few weeks with learning how to relax your mind even more? You know, that learning how to maybe just let go of all the concerns, let go of the even agendas that you have, which may be coming from ego or even over ambition. What about you just experiment with just being very present with activities, doing them the best to your ability, training your mind to be very much in the present, and then seeing if what I'm saying is true. Does something else kick in? Does this inbuilt inner system kick in inside yourself? My experience is showing me more and more that it is. And as an aside, before I close out, I am doing something soon. I'll leave a link in the comments box or somewhere around this podcast. that's called Sustainable High Performance, where I'm doing a 3-day intensive to explore some of this kind of stuff. It's not going to be overly promoted here, but it's new material from my point of view. If you're interested, you can check that out. So in a very succinct way, and I hope this makes sense, to me, the key to success really and sustain and like genuine, meaningful success is actually figuring out for you how to stay out of the way of your own mind, actually, more often. How do you stay out of the way of your own mind? Because the best success system overall really is to be present in a very meaningful way, where you're not overly dictated by your thoughts coming from the past, your unconscious mind, or your ego. That you're connected to this better part of you, what I call actually the inner CEO. The part of you that's clear, calm, centered, creative. It's a better communicator. And when you're in that part, you're going to enjoy and go into kind of free flow mode. And I'm going to talk about that actually in the next episode. So if you could, like I said the last time, I would really appreciate if you're enjoying the podcast, you might give them a star rating. You might leave me a positive testimonial on the podcast, because it really helps. And you might just hit like and maybe share it with somebody else. Anyway, food for thought. Take care. Bye.